The small convenience store smelled of stale coffee and cleaning supplies, its fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above the aisles. He had only come in for a bottle of water and maybe a moment to collect his thoughts. But the moment his eyes landed on the clerk behind the counter, his entire world tilted. Hanging from a thin, silver chain around the young clerk's neck was a pendant, a simple, worn-out piece of jewelry that should not be here. His throat tightened. His breath hitched. Because that pendant wasn't just any pendant. It was his daughter's. The very same one he had given her before she disappeared. He swallowed hard, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the quiet hum of the radio playing in the background. His fingers twitched, itching to reach out, to grab it, to demand where they had gotten it. But he forced himself to stay still. Stay calm. Instead, he moved forward slowly, his gaze fixed on the pendant, the memories of his daughter flashing through his mind like a cruel, fragmented movie. The last time he saw her, she had hugged him tight, tears in her eyes, promising she'd be okay. And then she was gone. That pendant had been a gift from him, a reminder that she would never be alone. And now, years later, it was here, around a stranger's neck. He needed answers. The clerk, a young man, barely in his 20s, glanced up as he approached the counter. His expression was neutral, almost bored, but there was something in his eyes that shifted when he noticed the way the man was staring. "Something wrong?" the clerk asked. The man hesitated, then forced a chuckle. "Sorry. Just, your pendant. It looks familiar." The clerk's hand instinctively rose to touch it. His fingers brushed over the worn surface, and for the briefest second, his expression flickered, something unreadable, something guarded. "Oh. Yeah." He nodded slowly. It was a gift. A gift. The words sent a shiver down the man's spine. His mind raced through a dozen possibilities. Who had given it to him? How did they get it? Was his daughter still out there? He clenched his jaw, trying to keep his voice casual. "Really? From who?" The clerk blinked. Then, for a split second, his expression turned cold. "A warning. Just someone I knew." That was a lie. The man could tell. He had spent years searching, digging through every possible lead, holding on to any hope that would bring him closer to his missing daughter. He knew when someone was hiding something. But why would this clerk, a complete stranger, lie? Something wasn't right. He needed to stay calm and play this carefully. So, he forced a nod, pretending to drop the subject, even as his pulse thundered in his ears. The clerk quickly bagged the bottle of water, pushing it across the counter. "That'll be $2. The man pulled out his wallet, handing over the cash, but his mind was somewhere else. The pendant. The clerk's reaction. The way his expression had shifted, just for a second. This wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. As he turned to leave, his fingers clenched around the receipt. His entire body felt wired, like he had just stepped into something far bigger than he realized. And then, just as he reached the door, a voice. Low. Quiet. Almost a whisper. "You shouldn't be asking questions." His stomach dropped. He turned sharply, but the clerk was already looking away, his face blank. The man didn't say anything. Didn't press. Instead, he walked out the door, stepping into the cold night air. But one thing was certain. He was coming back. And this time, he wouldn't be leaving without answers. The cold night air did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside him. His steps were slow, deliberate, but his mind was racing. That pendant, his daughter's pendant, was no coincidence. And the clerk's reaction? The way his face had shifted for just a moment before hiding behind a mask of indifference? That was a red flag. The man walked toward his car, gripping the keys so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had spent years searching for his daughter, following dead-end leads, holding on to fragments of hope that had long since crumbled. But this was real. This was the first solid clue he had seen in years, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. He sat in his car, staring at the store's dimly lit windows, watching the clerk through the glass. The young man was too composed. He continued scanning items, bagging groceries, acting as if nothing had happened. But he had slipped up. That whisper, "You shouldn't be asking questions," was proof that there was something deeper here. Something dangerous. And if he wasn't careful, he could be walking straight into a trap. He needed a plan. He couldn't just barge in tomorrow and start demanding answers. That would only get him shut out, or worse. No, he needed to play this smart. Step 1, find out more about the clerk. Who was he? Where did he come from? How did he end up with that pendant? He grabbed his phone, searching for the store's website. Nothing useful. Just standard business hours, an outdated "About Us" page, and a blurry group photo of employees from 2 years ago. He needed more. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. He had one other option. The next move, a return visit tomorrow, he would come back. But this time, he wouldn't be alone. There was someone he could call, someone who owed him a favor. A man who knew how to dig deep and find things people didn't want to be found. But before he could pull up the number, something caught his attention. Inside the store, the clerk was no longer behind the counter. The man leaned forward, his heart pounding. The store was nearly empty now. A single customer stood in the frozen food aisle, staring at a row of ice cream tubs. But the clerk was gone. He scanned the store, searching for any sign of him, then, his eyes locked onto something in the back. A shadow moving past the stockroom doors. Then, a sliver of light as the back exit opened. The man's pulse quickened. The clerk wasn't just stepping out for a smoke break. He was leaving early. That wasn't normal. Not for a late-night shift worker. Unless he was trying to avoid him. Without thinking, the man pushed open his car door and stepped out into the night. He moved quickly but carefully, keeping his footsteps light as he rounded the building's corner. The alley behind the store was dark, damp, littered with broken crates and trash bags. And up ahead, disappearing into the night, was the clerk. The young man walked fast, shoulders tense, hands shoved into his pockets. He was going somewhere. And he didn't want to be followed. The man's instincts screamed at him, this was the moment. This was the moment to follow. To find out who this clerk really was. To find out if this lead would bring him to his daughter, or to something much, much worse. The night swallowed the clerk's figure as he moved deeper into the alleyway. The man kept his distance, careful to stay in the shadows. His heart pounded in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to be careful. He had spent years searching, hoping for a moment like this. But now that he was here, now that he was actually following a real lead, he felt a strange weight settle over him. What if this wasn't the answer he had been searching for? What if he found something he wasn't ready to face? His grip tightened. No. He had come too far. There was no turning back now. The clerk moved quickly, weaving between dumpsters and stacks of empty crates before slipping through a narrow gap between two buildings. The man followed, carefully stepping over broken glass, his breath shallow. Then, a faint metallic clang. The clerk had stopped. He was unlocking a door. The man pressed himself against the wall, peering around the corner. A rusted metal door stood at the end of the alley, its paint peeling. The clerk pulled a key from his pocket, glancing over his shoulder before slipping inside. The man counted to 3, then moved. His heart hammered as he reached the door. He pressed a hand against it, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingers. It wasn't fully shut. A mistake? Or an invitation? He inhaled deeply, then pushed it open. The door creaked as it swung inward, revealing a dimly lit storage room. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with old cardboard boxes, mismatched furniture, and scattered tools. A faint hum of electricity buzzed from somewhere deeper inside. Then, footsteps. He froze. Somewhere ahead, the clerk was moving. The man crept forward, his shoes silent against the concrete floor. He ducked behind a stack of crates, his breath shallow. The clerk stood near an old wooden desk, rummaging through a drawer. A small, flickering desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. And then, the man saw it. A photo. The clerk pulled a worn photograph from the drawer, holding it between his fingers for a long moment. The man's stomach tightened. Even from this distance, he recognized the face in the photo. It was her. His daughter. His blood turned to ice. This wasn't a coincidence. This was planned. The clerk wasn't just some random worker. He was connected to her. He knew something. But before the man could process what this meant, before he could even take a step forward, the clerk's phone rang. A sharp, shrill noise that echoed through the room. The young man snapped to attention, quickly answering. Yeah. A pause. No. He was here. The man's breath hitched. Whoever was on the other end, they were talking about him. The clerk's voice lowered. I don't think he bought it. Yeah. I know. Another pause. Then, quieter, he's not going to stop. The man's pulse thundered in his ears. This was bigger than he thought. And if he didn't get out of here soon, he might not get another chance. But then, the clerk turned. And their eyes met. For a split second, neither of them moved. Then, the clerk lunged for something in the drawer. The man didn't wait to see what it was. He bolted. He slammed through the door, his feet pounding against the pavement as he raced back into the alley. Footsteps followed, a sharp, frantic rhythm behind him. He didn't dare look back. He just ran. And as he disappeared into the night, one thing became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just about the pendant anymore. Someone didn't want him to find his daughter. And they were willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. The man's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the dark alleyway, his footsteps echoing against the damp pavement. His heart thundered in his chest, but his mind was sharper than ever. This wasn't just a chance discovery. He had walked into something deliberate. Someone knew he was searching. Someone had planted that pendant, but why? He took a sharp turn, weaving through the maze of alleyways until he spotted a busy street ahead. Neon signs flickered, and the sounds of traffic filled the air. He slowed his pace, blending in with the late-night pedestrians. Behind him, he could still feel the weight of the chase, the invisible presence of someone watching. But no one followed. Not yet. His mind raced back to the storage room, the photo in the clerk's hands. It was her. His daughter. The truth was within reach, but he was playing a game he didn't understand. And now, they knew he was looking. He forced his breathing to steady, his hands trembling slightly as he slipped into a 24-hour diner on the corner. He needed a moment. A plan. Sliding into a booth near the back, he pulled out his phone. There was one person he could call. A friend from his past. Someone who had once told him, if you ever get into trouble, the kind that's bigger than you, call me. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the number. But before he could make the call, the diner door opened. His body tensed instinctively. He kept his eyes on the scratched-up menu in front of him but tracked the movement in his peripheral vision. Someone walked in. Not the clerk. Not anyone he recognized. But they knew he was there. A man in a dark jacket sat at the counter, ordering a coffee. His movements were too casual, too rehearsed. Another one. The man exhaled slowly. He wasn't just dealing with one person. This was bigger. His phone vibrated. A message. Unknown number, stop now. You're in over your head. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Whoever they were already watching him. He clenched his jaw. No. He wasn't stopping. Not now. Not when he was finally this close. He shoved his phone into his pocket and forced himself to stay calm. He needed information. And there was only one way to get it. He was going back. Back to the store the next night. He returned to the convenience store, but not as a customer. He waited outside, watching the employees change shifts. The clerk, the one with the pendant, walked out alone, heading toward the same alleyway as before. This time, the man followed without hesitation. His footsteps were silent, his breathing even. The clerk didn't run. Didn't panic. Instead, he stopped near the same metal door as before and leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. Waiting. The man stepped into the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Neither spoke for a moment. Then the clerk exhaled. You don't know what you're doing. The man took a step closer. Where is she? A flicker of something crossed the clerk's face, something painful. You need to walk away. The man's fists clenched. Not until I get answers. A tense silence. Then the clerk reached into his pocket. The man tensed, ready to react, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a folded note. The clerk extended it slowly. If you want the truth, go here. But after this, you're on your own. The man took the paper, unfolding it. A location. A time. Tomorrow night. He looked back up, but the clerk was already walking away, disappearing into the shadows. The man's fingers tightened around the note. This was it. The next step. But was it a lead? Or a trap? He was about to find out. The folded note felt heavier than paper in his hands. The address was scribbled in hurried strokes, a location he didn't recognize at first glance. But the time, midnight, was what made his stomach churn. Midnight meetings in unfamiliar places rarely led to anything good. But this wasn't about playing it safe. This was about his daughter. He spent the next few hours preparing. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew enough to expect danger. Whoever was behind this didn't want him asking questions. And yet, they had given him an invitation. Was it a trap? Or was someone on the inside trying to help? As the clock neared midnight, he parked his car 2 blocks away from the address on the note. The location was an abandoned warehouse, the kind of place where deals were made in shadows and secrets were buried deep. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city. He moved carefully, staying in the darkness, his pulse steady but his mind racing. He reached the warehouse entrance, a rusted metal door slightly ajar. They were expecting him. Taking a slow breath, he pushed it open and stepped inside. The space was vast, empty except for dim overhead lights casting eerie pools of yellow against the concrete floor. In the center of the room stood a single chair. And sitting in that chair was the clerk. But something was wrong. His wrists were bound. A thin trail of blood dripped from a cut along his temple. The man barely had time to react before a voice echoed from the shadows. You should have walked away. A figure emerged from the darkness. Dressed in black. Cold eyes. The kind of presence that commanded silence, demanded obedience. The man stiffened. He wasn't alone. More figures stepped forward, surrounding him in a slow, deliberate formation. 4. No, 5 of them. And every single one carried a weapon. His instincts screamed, this wasn't a warning anymore. This was an execution. A dangerous truth. The leader stepped closer, tilting his head. You've been looking for answers. His voice was eerily calm. And you've found them. The man's fists clenched. Where is she? The leader smirked. That depends. How badly do you want to know? The man stayed silent. The leader nodded toward the bound clerk. Do you know who he is? The man hesitated. The leader chuckled. Of course you don't. You're chasing ghosts, and you don't even know what's real. He turned slightly, pacing in slow, deliberate steps. She was special, he continued. More valuable than you could ever imagine. And yet, you, he pointed at the man, just couldn't let go. Something cold twisted in the man's stomach. What do you mean, valuable? He asked, his voice low. The leader studied him for a long moment. Then, with a cruel smile, he said, your daughter didn't disappear. She was taken. The words slammed into him. He had always feared it. Suspected it. The cold air burned his lungs as they sprinted through the deserted streets, his mind racing as fast as his feet. Gunshots rang out behind them, echoing through the night. The clerk ran ahead, leading him through a labyrinth of alleys and backstreets, navigating the city like a man who had run for his life before. They didn't stop. Not even when the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. Only when they reached the far edge of the city, a quiet industrial area littered with abandoned buildings, did the clerk finally slow down. The man leaned against a rusted dumpster, his heart pounding, hands on his knees. He turned to the clerk, eyes burning with fury. Start talking. The young man exhaled sharply, wiping blood from the cut on his temple. His expression was tense, guarded. But not afraid. This was never about the pendant, the clerk muttered. That was just bait. The man's stomach twisted. Bait. You led me to that store on purpose, he realized. The clerk nodded. You needed me to follow you. Another nod. The man's jaw clenched. Why? The clerk's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Because you needed to know the truth. The truth unfolds. The man straightened, his breath still heavy. Where is she? The clerk hesitated. Not out of deception, but out of caution. She's alive, he said finally. But, she's not the same. The words sent a chill down his spine. What do you mean? The clerk glanced around the dark alleyway, his body tense as if expecting an ambush. You don't understand what she became, he murmured. What they turned her into. The man's pulse roared in his ears. Turned her into? He grabbed the clerk by the collar, yanking him forward. What did they do to my daughter? The young man didn't flinch. She was part of a program, he said. A classified one. They recruit people, young, gifted, people with potential. His gut twisted. Potential for what? The clerk swallowed hard. For something beyond human. A sharp silence settled between them. The man stared, trying to process the weight of those words. No, he said, shaking his head. No, that's not possible. She was just a kid. The clerk's eyes darkened. Not to them. The man staggered back, the world around him spinning. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. He had spent years searching, believing she had been taken, held somewhere against her will. But now, the truth was something far worse. She's not a prisoner, the clerk said quietly. She's one of them now. One of them. The words sent a shiver down his spine. His daughter wasn't missing. She had chosen to stay. The hardest choice. The man ran a hand over his face, his mind spiraling. He had always imagined this moment, the day he would finally find her. He had pictured a rescue. He had imagined saving her from whatever had stolen her away. But now, it wasn't that simple. She wasn't lost. She had become something else. And that meant he had a choice to make. The clerk studied him, his expression unreadable. "You have to decide," he said. "If you keep pushing, keep searching, you might not like what you find." The man's hands curled into fists. He didn't care. He had come too far. No matter what she had become, no matter what they had done, he was going to see her. Even if it meant facing a truth he wasn't ready for. Even if it meant he wouldn't survive it. The clerk sighed, shaking his head. "Then I hope you're ready for what's next," he muttered. Because the next step was meeting her face to face. And she might not be the daughter he remembered. The night air was thick with silence. The man stood frozen, the clerk's words replaying in his mind. "She's not the same." He had spent years searching, following cold leads, believing his daughter was lost, trapped, waiting for him to find her. But now, she wasn't waiting. She was part of something bigger. Something he wasn't supposed to know about. His hands trembled as he exhaled, steadying himself. "Where is she?" The clerk hesitated. "I'll take you to her." No more riddles. No more half-truths. This was it. The final meeting. They drove in silence. The clerk took them far outside the city, where streetlights faded into nothingness. The road stretched long and empty, swallowed by darkness. After nearly an hour, the car slowed, approaching a hidden compound nestled between dense trees. It was old, abandoned-looking, but that was a lie. A single light flickered above a steel door. The clerk parked, cutting the engine. "She's inside." The man's pulse thundered. He wasn't ready. He didn't know if he ever would be. But he stepped out anyway. The air smelled of rain and earth. The wind whispered through the trees, but beneath it, there was nothing. No crickets. No distant hum of the city. Just an unnatural, heavy silence. The clerk led him forward, typing something into a keypad hidden in the shadows. A soft beep, a metallic click. The door swung open. Inside was dimly lit, cold, sterile. The kind of place where secrets were buried. His breath caught as he stepped in. And then, he saw her. Standing at the far end of the room, dressed in dark, military-style clothing. She turned slowly. And his heart nearly stopped. It was her. His daughter. Her face was the same, but different. Older, sharper. Hardened. But it was her. Alive. Breathing. Real. His throat tightened. He took a step forward. "It's me." She didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't run to him. She just stared. And when she finally spoke, her voice was steady, unreadable. "You shouldn't have come." His chest ached. "I've been looking for you. For years." She exhaled, shaking her head. "You were never supposed to find me." His hands clenched. "What did they do to you?" A pause. Then, a flicker of something in her eyes. A sadness. A knowing. "They made me better," she whispered. The words sent a chill down his spine. Better? Or something else? His mind screamed at him, this wasn't right. His daughter was standing right in front of him, but she wasn't coming home. Not because she was trapped. But because she didn't want to. She had chosen this. The realization, his heart cracked open, the weight of the truth crushing down on him. The girl he had spent years searching for. The daughter he had promised to protect. She was already gone. Not dead. Not missing. But changed. And she wasn't coming back. She stepped closer, just enough that he could see the faint scar near her temple, the kind that came from something surgical. They had done something to her. "Please," he whispered. "Come home." Her expression softened, but only for a second. Then the steel returned to her eyes. "This is my home now." His breath shuddered. He had lost her. Not to an abduction. Not to death. But to something much, much worse. She didn't belong to him anymore. She belonged to them. The final choice. The door behind him clicked. Locked. He wasn't leaving until she said so. He swallowed hard. What happens now? A long pause. Then, "You need to forget this," she said. "Go back to your life." His hands clenched. "I can't." She studied him, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she sighed. "I know." For the first time in years, she looked like his daughter again. Like the little girl he had once carried on his shoulders. The child who had held his hand so tightly, afraid of thunderstorms. But that girl was gone. And standing before him was a stranger who had her face. The weight of it crushed him. But then she did something unexpected. She reached up. Unclasped the pendant from her neck. And placed it in his hand. A gift. A goodbye. His throat burned. She stepped back. "You can leave now." His eyes stung, but he nodded. Because he finally understood. He couldn't bring her home. Because she was already where she wanted to be. And he had to let her go. Even if it broke him. The pendant felt cold in his hand. Small. Fragile. But heavier than anything he had ever held. His daughter, his little girl, stood before him, a woman now. A soldier. A stranger. And she was sending him away. A lump formed in his throat. "I don't understand," he whispered. She exhaled slowly. "I know." Her face didn't soften. She was resolute. There was no hesitation in her stance, no wavering in her words. She had made her choice. And he had no say in it. His grip tightened around the pendant, the last piece of her old life, the life he had spent years trying to recover. The silence between them stretched, filled with all the words neither of them could say. Then she nodded. "You should go now." His heart clenched. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked. Another long pause. Then, softer this time, quieter, "I don't know." The walk away, the door behind him unlocked. A final gift. A final choice. The man swallowed the lump in his throat and stepped back, watching her one last time. She didn't move. Didn't chase him. Didn't look away. But she didn't stop him either. And so, with a final breath, he turned, and walked out. The door sealed shut behind him. And just like that, she was gone again. But this time, there would be no searching. This time, there would be no rescue. Because she didn't need saving. She had become something else. And he had to accept that. The lesson he never expected. The drive home felt surreal. The road stretched endlessly ahead of him, but he barely noticed. His mind was stuck in that room, on her face, on the weight of what had just happened. For years, he had searched for answers. For years, he had believed she was out there, waiting to be found. But the truth? She had left on her own. She had chosen a life he couldn't understand, in a world he wasn't meant to know about. And he had spent so long fighting to bring her back that he had never once stopped to ask himself. What if she didn't want to come back? The hardest thing wasn't losing her. It was accepting that she had already left. And he had to let her go. Completely. Finally. Even if it broke him. The end. Or a new beginning. Back at home, he sat in the quiet of his living room, the pendant still in his hand. It was old now, worn down from years of time and distance. A relic of a life that no longer existed. He exhaled, his grip loosening. Then, finally, he set it down. And for the first time in years, he let go.